right, good morning. Welcome to those of you that are here in Phoenix. Glad you're here. For those of you that are watching us all different ways, online, apps, Roku, YouTube, we are very glad you are joining us for our series on Revelation. We called it The Clock is Ticking, but I think you can't see that now because that's there. If you want to know more about our ministry or get our handout, this handout today is monster. David said he had to do 150 slides on the screen last night. I kept him up half the night doing that, apparently. So we got a lot to talk about today. Now, if you want the handout, I don't know if I said this already, womensbiblestudy.com. Get the handouts, catch up on the lessons, whatever you need to do there. All right, we are working through Revelation, but before we actually really begin Revelation in its fullness, we decided to take 3 weeks and talk about a really, really important event that there's a lot of confusion about in this world. And so we're talking about the rapture. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to go verse after verse after verse, and you are going to be exhausted by the time we're done. We are going to take Revelation, and we're going to match it up to Matthew 24, what Jesus says. You are going to feel like you are in a lecture class this morning. And when you do something like this, the way I normally teach is try to put in really stupid jokes. You all know that. Try to at least make it, align with our lives so there's some kind of connecting the dots there. But that's not happening, so just don't plan on that today. Because we don't have time, okay? You don't have time for a joke, which is sad. All right, first verse. We'll put this one up on the screen. This is what this is all about. 1 Thessalonians, if you're new here and you're wondering what we're even talking about, this is an event that is going to happen, and this is it. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds and meet the Lord in the air, so we shall always be with him. So this is a huge event that's going to happen. You see, it's not a secret thing. We talked about this last week. We've been always taught that there's this secret rapture. Everyone just disappears in a heartbeat, and none of that's true. The Bible doesn't say that. This particularly says that you'll see Jesus. There's going to be trumpets. It's going to be a big monster scene going on when this happens. Next slide. Here's where we ended last week. These are the different views. We'll talk about what the 7-year period is. We'll talk about that in a second. Most of us in the United States are taught pre-tribulation rapture, which says that before the 7 years begins, we will be raptured out of here, that God will come, take us away so that we don't have to go through any of the tribulation period. Some people are mid-trib people, which means halfway through. Some people are post-trib, which says you will have to go through all of the tribulation period. And then there is pre-wrath, which says that there's a big difference between the wrath of Satan on this earth for the first seal judgments, and then the bowl and the trumpet judgments are the wrath of God. So there's 2 different ways to look at that. I'm going to talk fast. Like I said, you're going to have to probably watch this 4 times to catch what I'm saying. So I told you last week that I was pre-tribulation all my life because I didn't know any different. When I started reading the Bible, I realized that wasn't true. It wasn't even in the Bible. And I'll explain, I think by the time we're done today, you'll see why that is. This did make me laugh, though. It'll be my one funny thing today. I told you about this billboard that was 2011. People thought Jesus was coming back. Church would be raptured May 21st, 2011. Apparently, that was a Saturday. Somebody tweeted, I guess it was. I don't even know if they tweeted back then, but this is what he wrote. Do I have it on there? Since the rapture is supposed to happen on Saturday, it would be pretty funny if all the atheists hid from the Christian people. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if you actually believed that on the 21st, then you wake up and then all your non-Christian friends are gone and you're here, you'd be like, what just happened? So, all right, that's it for the jokes. All right. Earlier this summer, we went to Mexico the beginning of summer, and we stayed in a condo with some people. We didn't even know them. We ended up meeting them. It was a ministry thing. And we got to talking. He teaches in Texas. So we got to talking about what we believe, what we're teaching. So I said, I'm teaching Revelation. And he said, oh, okay. And he goes, well, what's your theory on tribulation? And I said, I'm definitely not a pre-tribber. And he was so shocked. He's like, oh, we need to talk. I'm like, all right, have a seat. So we had the same conversation that I would have with most anyone. It's not in the Bible. I'm sorry, but he gave me all the same things, the verses that we talked about last week, completely out of context, not happening, whatever that is. So anyway, as we were going to bed, I said, hey, good night, see you in the morning. He said, not if the rapture happens. And I said, I started laughing, and I'm like, you're probably right. I'm probably going to be left behind just because I don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, okay? But once I realized that pre-tribulation was not in the Bible, then I sort of became a mid-trib person, but I didn't even know why. It seemed the only one that made sense. But this summer, I was able to spend a lot more time on this, and I really landed on the fourth one that you saw up there, the pre-wrath scenario. It is literally the only one that makes biblical sense, and I think I can prove that to you today. We're gonna do a timeline, and then here's what's going to happen next week. After we're done today, you're going to have 9 million questions. You have a question thing on the front of it, on your table. Write out the questions. Next week, we are flying in from Florida, Mr. Charles Cooper, and he is going to be able to answer all your questions. Here is who Charles is. I put his bio up here. Charles Cooper is an author, lecturer, and church consultant. He's the founder and director of the Pre-Wrath Resource Institute of Orlando, Florida. Born in Arkansas, graduated Baptist University with a BA in Pastoral Ministries, minor in Greek, received a Master of Theology from Dallas Theological Seminary, where he was honored with the Harry Ironside Expository Preaching Award. Since becoming a communicator of God's truth at 15, he began a pastor for 23 years in addition to his other vocational responsibilities. He taught homiletics and hermeneutics at Moody Bible Institute for 6 years. He was an 8-year instructor, biblical research education consultant for Sola Scriptura, an organization dedicated to affirming the authenticity, accuracy, and authority of the Bible, the standard for truth. Sola Scriptura owns the Bible collection. I'm just kind of flipping through this. For the past 13 years, Coop has researched, written, and taught conferences pertaining to the pre-wrath rapture position. He abandoned a growing career among conservative evangelicism because of his refusal to continue to support the pre-tribulation rapturism. Since 1996, he devoted his life to preaching and teaching congregations around the world the pre-wrath rapture position. And the one question we will ask him is, why in the world does this matter? And he will say exactly what I said last week, because it does matter, because we are not going to be prepared if this stuff starts happening and we have no idea what to do. And most Christians will walk away from their faith. That's why this is so incredibly important. Now, we're having Charles come in because there are people like him who do this for a living, like this is what he does and studies. I don't. I only have this much time in my life, and we're lucky that these got done. So that's how that works for me. I realized this when I was working on this lesson. I'm trying to deal with scrolls and wrath and rapture and all these crazy things. I'm in this zone, and my phone rings, and Sean and Tricia are on their way to have a baby at the hospital. And so I'm like, well, I better answer that call, you know. But my deal with kids when my kids have babies is like, I always tell them, call me when you're 8 centimeters, and then I can run down to the hospital. My goal is to walk in the door as the doctor walks in. Okay, we watch the baby be born. I take pictures. I'm like, oh, it's so cute. That's awesome. And then I leave, and I go back home and study. So that's my whole life. So I don't have a lot of time to apparently hang out with my grandchildren, or do this. So that's where my life is at this particular point. But as I was studying, Sean called, and then just then my phone bleeped over, and it was Dusty, my other son, and he's like, hey, Mom, I'm out of town on a business trip. Do you want to just chat? And I'm thinking, I have wrath, and I have rapture, and I don't have time for this, but I have to be a nice mom. And then, of course, Sean calls in, and then my house phone rings, and it's my husband. And he's like, hi, honey, I just want to talk. And I'm like, I don't have time to talk to anybody, okay? So that's why Charles Cooper is coming in, because he's going to answer all your questions next week that you have that I do not have time for, okay? So that's how this is all going to play out. Now, you're going to have to study this on your own. I'm going to give you some stuff up here. I think I put it in your handout. YouTube, Charles Cooper Pre-Wrath. Just type that in your YouTube channel and watch away. Last week, we talked about the serious implications of why we should not believe in pre-trib. Here's one of them. Pre-trib is not in the Bible. It just isn't. I'll prove that to you today. 2, Christians will not be prepared if they are not raptured out of here. They're not going to be prepared. Third one, here's our biggest problem. Pre-trib teaching is a sacred cow, and nobody wants to backtrack what they have taught all their life. They just don't want to do it. Churches will not do it because they believed it, taught it, they can't backtrack. But what's her problem is it's hurting the Christians. That's what it's hurting, and no one will be ready for this. All right. What exactly, let's start here, is the 7-year period that we're talking about. You and I know it is the 7 years of tribulation. Let's look at our next screen here. Here's what's going on in our life. I don't know if you can see that. That turned out really weird. It might look better in your screen. Anyway, if you look at the very left-hand side, creation, you have 4,000 years. Then you have the cross, which you can't see on that. There's the cross. Then you have Jesus that dies on the cross. There's 2,000 years. We're in that black gap right there between when the tribulation starts and when, this 2,000 years between Jesus. Now, most people say, where do people get this from? What is this 7 years of tribulation? And it comes from the book of Daniel, and it's a prophecy that prophesies about the end times. Now, it's called the 70th week of Daniel. 69 weeks have already happened, and we're going to just read this together because it was the easiest thing I could do to make it right. Got questions seem to make it easy for us, so we're just going to read it together, and you can study it on your own at home. What are the 70 weeks of Daniel? 70 weeks prophecy is one of the most significant and detailed messianic prophecies of the Old Testament. It's found in Daniel 9. Chapter begins with Daniel praying for Israel, acknowledging the nation's sin against God and asking for God's mercy. As Daniel prayed, the angel Gabriel appeared to him and gave him a vision of Israel's future. In verse 24, Gabriel said, 77s are decree for your people and your holy city. Almost all commentators agree that 77s should be understood as 70 weeks of years. In other words, a period of 490 years. 1 week, one of these weeks is considered a 7-year period. These verses provide sort of a clock that gives an idea of when the Messiah would come and some of the events that would accompany his appearance. Gabriel said the prophetic clock would start at the time that a decree was issued to rebuild Jerusalem. From the date of that decree to the time of the Messiah would be 483 years. We know from history that the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem was given by King Xerxes of Persia in 445 BC. If you can look all this, you can look this up yourself. Nehemiah 2:1-8. First unit of 49 years, 7 sevens, covers the time that it took to rebuild Jerusalem, with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble, Daniel 9:25. The rebuilding is chronicled in the book of Nehemiah. Using the Jewish custom of a 360-day year, 483 years after 445 BC places us at AD 30, which would coincide with Jesus' triumphal entry in Jerusalem. Matthew 21, the prophecy in Daniel 9 specifies that after the completion of the 483 years, the anointed one will be cut off. This was a fulfillment when Jesus was crucified. Daniel 9:26 continues with the prediction that after the Messiah is killed, the people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. This was fulfilled with the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. So what I want you to see is Daniel's prophesying this and exactly the time period. So Daniel's given us this timeline already. And then it talks about the ruler will come, and that ruler will be the Antichrist. Out of the 77s, 69 have been fulfilled in history. That should wake us up just a little bit. That leaves one more 7 to be fulfilled. Most scholars believe that we're living in a huge gap between the 69th and 70th. My first question to ask Charles Cooper next week is, why is there a gap? I don't understand why there would suddenly be this gap, and I'm hoping he has a really good answer. But the final 7-week period is what we call the tribulation period. Now, I think I told you the first time we talked about this that I don't believe at all that the tribulation period has started, because there's one thing that has to happen which actually catapults the 7 years of tribulation to begin with, and it hasn't happened yet. Look at Daniel 9:27. It tells us what will start this 7-year period. Daniel 9:27 says, and he, the Antichrist, will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, the 7 years, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offerings. So, the Antichrist has to come on the scene. It's not even an option, because I always thought that it meant that the Antichrist would try to just make a peace treaty with Israel, like, hey, baby Israel, we'll take care of you, don't worry. But the more I'm thinking this through and reading, I'm thinking, it seems like he's talking about the temple and the Jewish people and what they want to do with it. Because look what it says. The Antichrist will come to the Jewish people in Jerusalem, and he's going to say, look, I'm going to start something new. Apparently, he's going to allow them to start, sacrificing and offering grain offerings and doing their Passover and all that stuff. So weird to us. There's not a third temple that's built right now, but I do believe there has to be a temple built or something like that. Now, our question is, why would they want to do that? But as Christians, as followers of Jesus, they don't we believe that Jesus was our ultimate sacrifice. Like, we don't need to go sacrifice animals because Jesus already did that. His blood covered our sin. So for us, it's unimaginable. But if you are a Jewish person who does not believe in Jesus, it makes total sense what their thought process is in. They want to rebuild this temple. Here is a picture right here. This is what Israel looks like right now. Most of us know that Dome on the Rock is that gold colored. If you look down farther a little bit, there's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. If you look beyond that, there isn't, this picture doesn't depict it, but there is a piece of land there. And whether the Dome on the Rock stays, something happens to wipe it off the face of the earth, who knows? That is the place where a temple will need to be built. And to us, it's kind of unimaginable. But remember Daniel 9:27. He's going to make a firm covenant with many for those 7 years, and then they're going to start allowing all of these offerings and things to start happening again. Now, if you don't believe me, I went on to a Jewish website called chabad.org. Here was the question. I don't know if you please explain all this business about animal sacrifices in the temple. Are you really planning to reinitiate this at some point? Here's what he said. Cain and Abel made vegetable and animal sacrifices. Noah made animal sacrifices. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all highly enlightened people, made animal sacrifices. And the Torah prescribes a whole slew of sacrifices to be made in the tabernacle in the desert, then in the holy temple in Jerusalem. And guess what? In our prayers for the past 2,000 years, we've been asking for God to let us rebuild that temple so we can start doing those sacrifices just like he asked us to. So we are Western thinkers. We don't even think like that, but they do. And remember, when we did our chart a couple weeks ago, there used to be like 1,000 Jewish people. Now there's 6 million Jewish people. They want their temple. They want this to happen. And so now you see this all building up to where we've never seen this before. I just saw Hearts, H-A-A-R-E-T-Z, Israel News, Thursday, August 30th. Look what it says here. Temple Mount activists plan Passover sacrifice near Western Wall. The ceremony has been conducted annually for 15 years, but it began as a semi-underground event in which animal was sacrificed a few days before Passover. Activists for rebuilding the temple on the Temple Mount will hold their annual event reenacting the Passover sacrifice, and he goes on to that. This is happening. Okay, it's happening small, and I have a feeling because the Bible says this is going to happen that it's going to eventually grow. And like I said, for us, that's just news to us, but we need to realize what's going on over there. All right, let's start here and get a big picture. As we begin in Revelation, we see what is a scroll. So this is what we're going to talk about. You don't have a picture. Do we have a picture? There it is. I made a picture of it. Here's note to self. I got that picture. I sent it to Costco because I wanted one of these big pictures of here up here. When Costco actually says that it's too blurry, you might want to believe them, okay? Because I didn't. I went ahead. It was horrible. It looked horrible. So this is it. This right here is from Beth Emanuel Messianic Synagogue. I think it's a great picture of this scroll that we're going to see in Revelation that Jesus is going to open. It has 7 seals right there, and we're going to pick up. So keep that in your mind. I wanted it up here so you could see what it looked like. But we're going to talk about this. To me, inside that scroll, when Jesus wipes away every one of those seals, when that scroll is unrolled, it's going to be the wrath of God. Everything in there tells us the wrath that's going to come upon this earth. It's going to be tough. You don't want to be here. You won't be here at that particular time. But it's going to tell all the bad things that are going to happen. The oceans are going to be destroyed. The animals in the ocean, the rivers, there's no water, the fire. It's just bad, bad stuff. And it's God's wrath upon this earth and wrath for those who did not put their faith and trust in him. So keep that scroll in mind. Now, let's start at Revelation 5, verse 1. This is the scene that John sees in heaven. He says, "And I saw on the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. Then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals?' No one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. So I wept because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or look at it. But one of the elders said to me, 'Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and loose its 7 seals.' And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb. as though it had been slain. We all know that's Jesus, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are 7 spirits of God sent out to all earth. We'll talk about that when we do Revelation. Then he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on him. So we see that Jesus steps on the scene. And remember, when he first came to earth, it was a suffering servant so he could die for our sins. The second time he comes back, it's not going to be a good deal. He's coming back for judgment on those who refuse to believe in him. I believe that the seals on that scroll, they're not judgments. They're just opening. They're telling us what's going to happen during the 7-year period before the wrath of God, or actually the first 3.5 years. I think the 7 seals are the wrath of Satan, not God. So every time Jesus opens a seal, it's Satan's wrath upon this earth. We see that in Revelation 12:12. Therefore rejoice, O heaven, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you having a great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. So the time that Satan is allowed to reign, because remember, Satan will indwell the Antichrist. And Satan is the one who's basically pulling all the strings for everything that the Antichrist is going to be doing. Now, we'll put up this next screen really quick right here. This is how it works. Each seal is something. We'll talk about that. The Antichrist comes on the scene. There's war, there's famine, there's all of these things. And then we'll see after the 7th seal is broken, then it will open up the trumpets and the bowl judgments, and that will be the wrath of God. Now, what we're going to start with is we're going to take a timeline, but we're going to work backwards, and it might confuse you, but I think you'll get it. I want to talk first about this day of the Lord. And this will be our first screen. Once I get this, okay, here we go. We're going to talk about the day of the Lord. And we need to know what exactly that means and what that has to do with any of this at all. But the day of the Lord is when God will unleash his wrath upon this world. Now, as we do this, like I said, we're going to be working backwards. And then at the very end, we're going to read Matthew 24, what Jesus says. And I think it will all come together for you at that particular time. Now, when we talk about the day of the Lord, it doesn't actually mean a literal 24-hour period. Look at this next thing. It's the Hebrew word yom. It has 3 literal meanings: 12-hour period, 24-hour period, or an indefinite amount of time. So when we're talking about the day of the Lord, it could be this indefinite amount of time when the wrath of God is poured out on this earth. Now, let's go back into the Old Testament and the New Testament and see what this day is supposed to be. Zephaniah 1:18 says this: neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath. Always keep that in mind, the Lord's wrath. But the whole land shall be devoured by the fire of his jealousy, for he will make speedy riddance of all who dwell in the land. Okay, this is this day of the Lord that's going to happen when the wrath of God is poured out on this earth. Revelation 6:16 says this. He's talking about this day of the Lord. He says, the mountains and rocks fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who is able to stand? This is after the 6th seal. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. 2 Peter talks about it. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, which the heavens will pass away with a great noise. Elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, which the heavens will be dissolved, being in fire, elements will melt, and fervent heat. So you'll see all of that happening at the bowl judgments and the trumpet judgments at the very end. So when is this day of the Lord? We're going to start our timeline. When does the Bible say this is going to happen? Isaiah 13 says this: see, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. Here's what happens. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. So he's telling us, here's the day of the Lord, but something happens before this day of the Lord, which brings us to our next screen. So we're getting a timeline. Here's the day of the Lord, but before the day of the Lord, we see this celestial darkening. We also see it in Joel 2:31. Joel says this: the sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before when? Before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. So we're kind of seeing in the Old Testament, and it's running into the New Testament, we're kind of putting it together. Now, we're going to see what comes before that. Look what Jesus says. Matthew 24, immediately after the distress of those days, so something has to happen before this on our timeline, the sun will be darkened. This is the words of Jesus in Matthew. Jesus tells us in Matthew 24 an exact timeline. I do not know how I missed it all these years. I don't know how anyone's missed it. It's right there. This is what Jesus says. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, heavenly bodies will be shaken. Mark says the same thing, but in those days following that distress. So what is this distress? What happens before that to make it, after the distress comes the celestial darkening? Verse 21 says this, "For then there will be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will be. Unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved for the sake of the elect those days. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of heaven will be shaken." So what we see next on our timeline is this great tribulation. He's saying after the great tribulation is going to come the celestial darkening and then the day of the Lord. Now, this great tribulation, this is going to be a really, really tough time if you're a Christian here. We see this in Revelation 13:17. "It was granted to him," which is the Antichrist, "to make war with the saints and to overcome them." This great tribulation period, the Antichrist is going to be all done with you Christians. There will be tribulation like you have never seen, martyrdom like we have never seen on this earth before. And people, that's why I'm saying, we have to know this is coming. Because we have to make a decision. Do I love Jesus enough, or am I going to fall away? And those are really what we have to ask. Jesus tells us that for this great tribulation, when this happens, he says this in Matthew 24, "To those who are in Judea must flee in the mountains." You better get out of there as fast as you can. The Antichrist will be on a rampage. I'm assuming it's going to be all over the world. But especially Jesus is talking to Jewish disciples at that point in his life, so they're going to understand this. "Whoever's on the housetop must not go down to get the things that are in the house. Whoever's in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. Woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing in those days. Pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on the Sabbath." Now, Jesus wasn't mentioning this because he was saying this is going to happen on the Sabbath. He's trying to tell them the urgency of this. If you have ever been to Israel, you know that nothing happens on the Sabbath. Okay, when we went there, I just wanted them to make me pancakes every morning, okay? And on the Sabbath, guess what? There were no cooks. They put out some bread, and they wanted me to make a piece of toast. I'm like, no, that's not working for me. I want my pancakes, okay? But on the Sabbath, everything shuts down. Like even your elevators, there's one elevator specifically for Jewish people so that they don't have to work on the Sabbath, and it goes up and down on its own so they don't have to press a button. It's pathetic, okay? Actually, I'm sorry, but it just is. It ruins my life. It ruins Rob's too. He's like, "Can I get a cheeseburger with cheese on it?" They're like, "Oh yeah, no, we don't make those things. We don't put cheese and meat." And it's, okay, it just doesn't work for me. Anyway. All that to say that that's what Jesus was saying. Everything slows down on the Sabbath. There's no bus drivers, there's no Uber drivers, there's no nothing. And you're not going to get out of town fast if it's on the Sabbath. So Jesus was trying to make a point. It's very, very urgent that when this great tribulation happens, you better run for the hills because there's a lot of hurt that's going to happen. Jesus goes on to say in verse 22 this, "Unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. For the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short." Jesus tells us right there. Why is it going to be cut short? Because then we will be raptured out of here. We're not going to have to go through all 7 years. He's saying, but for the sake of the elect, I'm cutting those days short for you. Now what I want to do is I want to go to Revelation, and I want to start seeing what Revelation and the seals that Jesus is talking about. I know you guys can't see this over here, but it's up on the screen, so you're good to go. We're working backwards, remember this. Now, Revelation 6:12. "I watched as he opened the sixth seal." Now, if I had my cute little seal up here, you'd see we're working backwards. Go to the sixth seal. There was what? A great earthquake. And then what happened? The sun turned black. The whole moon turned blood red. The stars in the sky fell. And we see that right here at the celestial darkening. Jesus opens the sixth seal, and the exact same thing happens that he's talking about. So now what we're doing is we're adding this sixth seal right here at the celestial darkening, because that's just how this works out here. Now let's go to the next thing, the thing before this. It's called the abomination of desolation. I need to explain that. Matthew 24:15 says this. Therefore, Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the place, let the reader understand. Now, what is this abomination of desolation? Let's go back to Daniel 9:27. The Antichrist comes on the scene. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7-year period in Jerusalem. In the middle of this 7 years, at 3.5 years point, he will put this, the Antichrist will walk into this temple in Jerusalem. He will put an end to the sacrifice and the offerings. He made this treaty with them, and the Antichrist is going to come in and say, sorry, not doing that anymore. And on a wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. It seems to be saying that the Antichrist will walk into the temple and say, no longer are you worshiping to your God. He may set up some kind of a statue like Nebuchadnezzar did. We don't know what that means, except whatever it is, he will say, you will no longer worship your God, you will worship me. And that's what's happening right here. I want to explain to you 167 BC, a Greek ruler, did I write that out there? I don't know if I did or not. A Greek ruler with the name of Antiochus Epiphanes set up an altar to Zeus over the altar of a burnt offering in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. So 167 years before Christ, this particular event happened in Jerusalem in the temple. He sacrificed a pig on the altar in the temple. This event is known as the abomination of desolation. Now in Matthew 24:14, Jesus is speaking 200 years after the abomination of desolation, described that it had already occurred. So Jesus must have been prophesying that something like this is going to happen in the future, that is something like that, where now the temple is desecrated and whatever this is going to happen. Most Bible prophecies, believe that most Bible prophecy interpreters, there you go, believe that Jesus is always referring to the Antichrist when he's talking about this Antioch Epiphanes. So we put that picture back up there with Israel. We don't even need to do that. That's fine. You get the point. I want to tell you about that land right there and what just happened. Like, why is that like that? And why do the Muslims have that spot right there? And so we'll read this next thing. When Israel took control over that part of Jerusalem after the Six-Day War in 1967. Now, a couple weeks ago, we did our whole timeline of that. And I want you to realize, 1967. Okay, we're talking how many years ago? 60, 70? Okay, this is all happening in our generation. This is happening really, really fast. And remember, there weren't many people, Jewish people living in Israel at that time. And this was a big event. So Israeli leaders allowed an Islamic religious trust to have authority over the Temple Mount and the Dome on the Rock as a way of helping keep the peace. Remember, you're talking Palestinians and Jews and bombings and wars and fighting, and now you understand why there's so much tension over there. It's all because of that land. Because the Muslims think it's theirs, and the Jews think it's theirs, and there's all this tension. But what they did is they wanted to keep peace, so they said, all right, you can keep your Dome on the Rock there. Since that time, Jews and Christians have been allowed limited access to the area, and you're not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount if you are a Christian or a Jew. Now you understand why this is an issue over there. Let's read this article, May 30th, 2017. Rabbi Richmond, director of the International Department of the Temple Institute, says he is committed to rebuilding Jerusalem's Temple Mount. Israeli Brigade Commander Colonel Mata Gur captured the Temple Mount in 1967. After the capture, he announced, the Temple Mount is in our hands. The Temple Mount is in our hands. Retaking the temple was important to the Jewish world because the site was where King Solomon built the first Jewish temple. When the temple was destroyed, a second temple was built, only to later fall in 70 AD to the Romans. Recapturing the site meant the Jews could have their long-awaited third temple. It would be hard, I think, not to see what's happened in the past 50 years as a tremendous, not just fulfillment of prophecy, but a tremendous jumpstart, a tremendous fast forward, Richmond said. It's more than prophetic. It's like a kiss from heaven. It's like a divine kiss. It's like an intimate brush with the reality of God's compassion and love. He keeps his promises. The Institute is already working on blueprints for the new temple. Today, there's a lobby in Knesset, Israel's parliament, of how many members of Knesset there are constantly speaking about Jewish rights to pray on the Temple Mount. There are members of Knesset that actually talk about the rebuilding of the temple. Do you realize that 20 years ago, these people wouldn't have been given a moment on primetime television to say these things? They would have been laughed out. And now it has become a reality before our eyes. Whatever this abomination of desolation is has to happen on that land, on that mount, and most likely there will be a third temple. So that's what I'm saying. Watch the news. Watch the news and see what's going on in that area. And now you have something to go, okay, now I know what to look for. And when I start seeing things like this happening, and if someone gets up and said, hey, we're building a new temple right next to the Dome on the Rock, you'll be like, ding, 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 ding. Okay, and then the next thing is some guy shows up on the scene and he's like, hey, we're going to let the Jews start sacrificing. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, that should be a big deal to you. Revelation 13:5 says this about the Antichrist. He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. So he's able now to continue after he does this abomination of desolation for another 3.5 years. Here's what Revelation 13:4 says, and you need to understand this too, because this is kind of interesting. It alludes to the fact that the Antichrist will die and then rise from the dead. And I know that sounds really weird, but the Bible, and I'll show you this, he's wounded somehow. It says a head wound, but then suddenly he will rise from the dead and people will follow him. Look at this. Revelation 13:14. Because of the signs he was given the power to do on behalf of the first beast, we've got Satan indwelling him, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth. So now the Antichrist is deceiving everyone that's here. He ordered them to set up an image. This is what we're talking about in the temple, that may be the abomination of desolation. An image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. So talking about the Antichrist. Revelation 13 says this, now the beast, which is the Antichrist, which I saw was like a leopard, his feet was like the bear, the mouth, we'll talk all about that. The dragon, Satan, gave him power, his throne, and great authority. And look what this says, and I saw one of his heads, as it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. So we have this weird thing that somehow this is how the Antichrist will get a lot of attention. We have news, we have CNN, we have Fox News. You can transport this news all over the world in pictures, so you kind of see that they're going to see him die, and then they're going to see him. And if Christians do not know this, they are going to be so confused. And they're just going to follow right along and just think the Antichrist is of God. So Daniel gives us a timeline. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7 will be this abomination of desolation. So that puts us right here where we have this. You have the abomination of desolation. You have, after that happens, the great tribulation where they said, you better run because this is going to be a horrible time. Then you will have this celestial darkening. And then the day of the Lord when God's wrath is poured out on this earth. Now, let's talk about what happens before the abomination of desolation. We will call it the beginning of sorrows. Jesus says this in Matthew 24, verse 5, for many will come in my name, claiming, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pangs. We call this the beginning of sorrows. And let's see where it lines up with Revelation. Revelation 6, Jesus opens the first seal. He says, I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in voice, come. I looked, and there was before me a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. Now, I always felt like the Antichrist would come on the scene as a man of peace, and I love everyone, and we're going to bring everyone together. But I think instead that I've changed my view on that because of this. I think he will come with a crown, which means he will have a lot of authority, and he will ride out to conquer as many people. I think a lot of this will go on in the Middle East. He will try to conquer, Egypt or Afghanistan, or he'll ride out, and his whole idea is to conquer all of these different places. He's going to be the ultimate deceiver. We're going to line that up with Matthew 24, where Jesus says, "For many will come in my name, claim I am the Christ, and will deceive many." The Antichrist is the ultimate deceiver. Then Jesus opens seal number 2. Look at verse 4. Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword. So we see in Matthew 24, Jesus says this, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you're not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come." So you kind of see the second seal with what Jesus says about war. Now you see him open seal 3. Look down at verse 6. Look, 5. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wages, 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and wine." What he's saying here is at this particular point, the Antichrist comes on the scene, there's going to be war, and now there's going to be a huge famine. There's just not going to be enough food for everyone. Look what Jesus says in Matthew 24:7. "Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places." Jesus is coming right along and lining everything up with the seals that he opens in Revelation. Seal 4. Then when the Lamb opened the 4th seal, verse 8, I looked, and there before he was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by a sword. 1/4 of the earth with being killed by a sword, famines and plagues by wild beasts of the earth. What Jesus says in Matthew 24:7, "Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, famines and earthquakes in various places." You've got all of this war, all this going on, and now it's 1/4 of the world is going to be affected at this particular time. And it's so amazing to me to see what we look at here now is our next thing. We see that you have the middle of the week here, which is the abomination of desolation. We've already talked about that. You have before the Great Tribulation. And we have, if I could actually do this right here, we have this beginning of sorrows. Apparently, I haven't done this very well. We see here the beginning of sorrows right here, and then we show that up with what we just did. Apparently, I haven't been turning these. You've got the seals. So seals that Jesus opened, 1 through 4, are the beginning of sorrows, which is what we just talked about, that you have famines and earthquakes and Antichrist comes on the scene. So none of this starts until the Antichrist comes on the scene. You got to get that in your head here. Then we have this middle of the week, 3.5 years into it, where there's the abomination of desolation. We see the great tribulation that's going to happen, then the celestial darkening day of the Lord. Now, I think that we kind of see that with the Bible. Now, the 5th seal, look at what Jesus says here. When I opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they'd maintained. These are the ones that have died in this great tribulation. They cried with a loud voice, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were killed as they were completed. The great tribulation is where many, many people will die. We talked about that. And this is what Jesus says. We'll go back to this. Unless those days have been cut short, no life would have been saved for the sake of the elect. That lines us up right there with what Jesus says the 5th seal is, and that is the great tribulation right there. I don't know, can we put that up on the board up there, that next screen? I don't know if you've got it. There you go. You see that. Daniel prophesies about this. He prophesied this after the abomination of desolation in Daniel. Look what he says in Daniel 11. "And forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. They shall take away the daily sacrifices, place their abomination of desolation." Daniel's telling us this, can't even tell you how many years beforehand. Verse 32, "Those who do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt with flattery, but the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. And those of the people who understand shall instruct many, yet for many days they shall fall by a sword, flame, by captivity and plundering." This is a tough, tough time, and it's on the 5th seal during this great tribulation. Now, let's complete our timeline right there. Zephaniah 1:14 through 18 says this, "The great day of the Lord is near and coming quickly, listen. The cry on the day of the Lord will be bitter and shouting of the warrior there. That day will be a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of trouble and ruin, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, a day of trumpet and battle cry against the fortified cities and against the corner towers. I will bring distress on the people, and they will walk like blind men because they have sinned against the Lord. Their blood will be poured out like dust, and their entrails like filth. Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to save them on the day of the Lord's wrath. In the fire of his jealousy, the whole world will be consumed, for he will make a sudden end of all who live on the earth. And we see that as our final one right here. That finishes out. The day of the Lord is God's wrath. Look at verse Isaiah 13:9. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day, with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. We see this in Revelation 6 after he opened the sixth seal. We saw the sun turn black. We saw the moon turn red. The skies fall right there on the sixth seal. He said, then the sky receded like a scroll rolling up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, whoever is left here who doesn't want to know Jesus, that princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and every slave and every free man hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains, fall on us and hide from us the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath is come. Who can stand? Zephaniah 1 says, the great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hastens quickly. The noise of the day of the Lord is bitter. The mighty men shall cry out. The day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble, distress, devastation, desolation, darkness, gloominess, clouds, and thick darkness. So here so far is where we have our whole timeline, and we see what Jesus says in Matthew on the bottom literally coincides with the seals in Revelation when Jesus is opening those 7 particular seals. So the question is, when is the rapture? When does the rapture happen in this? And look at what he tells us when this is going to be. Matthew 24, verse 29, Jesus says, but immediately after the tribulation, those days, we got that right there in the Great Tribulation. Look what he says. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, the powers of heavens will be shaken. Then, look what happens. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. And all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and glory. Look what he does. He will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and he will gather together his elect from the 4 winds, north, south, east, west of the entire earth, from one end of the sky to the other. That aligns up with 1 Thessalonians. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout. If we go back and look at what Jesus just said, the Son of Man will appear in the sky. We will shout the voice of an archangel and with the trumpet of God. We see it what Jesus says, and we see it in Thessalonians. Then those who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord. Jesus says it a different way. He's going to send forth his angels. He's going to gather everyone together, and then they're going to go up, and that's when the rapture happens. 1 Corinthians 15 says, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised, and we will be changed. It's all over the Bible, but it just shocks me that it's right there. So I talked to someone, this guy in Mexico, and I said, well, Matthew 24 just gives you a timeline. He goes, oh, Matthew 24, it's just kind of all over the board. You just don't really know which part of, and I'm like, how can you even say that? He just gave us a timeline that literally lined up with the seals. How can you say that you have no idea that what Jesus is talking about? But we've been taught it all of our life, and we've got to get it out of our head. Then I want to show you the coolest scene ever, and this is why I believe this is when the rapture happens. I think the rapture happens right here, right after this celestial darkening, right before God's wrath, because here's what we see in Revelation 7. This is so cool. I don't know how I never saw this before. After this, I saw 4 angels, so this is after the 6th seal. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth. When they say 4 corners, they usually mean like you've got these huge angels, north, south, east, west. They're holding back the 4 winds of the earth, Why? To prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or any tree. Because devastation, this God's wrath, is just about ready to happen. And when those angels let everything go, the wrath of God will destroy this earth. But at this particular point, they're holding back these winds. Then I saw another angel coming from the east, having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the four angels who had been given the power to harm the land and the sea, God's wrath. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude. Now think about this. He's in heaven. And John's seeing this vision, and he's looking around. Look what happens. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and in front of the Lamb. They just show up in heaven. And you're like, where did all these people come from? From every tribe, nation. They just show up in heaven. They were wearing white robes. Now remember, when they were here, the Great Tribulation, these guys were sitting under the altar. They had souls. They had robes, but they had to wait until they got bodies. This particular thing, all of a sudden, there's all these bodies up in heaven. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands. They cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." All the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the four living creatures. They fell down on their faces among the throne and worshiped God, saying, "Amen, praise and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor and power and strength be our God forever and ever." Then look at this. Then one of the elders asked me, "These in the white robes, who are they? And where did they come from?" Like suddenly there's this scene in heaven and they're going, where did all these people just come from? They weren't here 5 minutes ago and now they're here. I answered, "Sir, you know." And he said, "These are the ones that have come out of the Great Tribulation," right there. "They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple, and he who sits on the throne will spread his tent over them. Never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat upon them, nor scorching heat, for the Lamb is at the center of the throne. They will be their shepherd. He will be their shepherd. He will lead them to the springs of living water and wipe away every tear from their eye." And when does that happen? Right here after the sixth seal. There is no other way to explain this whole entourage of people that have just shown up in heaven with white robes on. Because if you make it through the Great Tribulation, which I'm assuming most people won't if they're followers of Christ, you will be martyred for your faith. And if not, whoever's left over from here as a follower of Christ will be raptured out of here. Because Jesus said, "I'm cutting the time short. Otherwise, even the elect wouldn't even make it." That's what it says. In light of this, I do not see any kind of rapture before seal number 1 or the beginning of sorrows over here. What I want to do really quick is, we've got a lot of verses, but I clearly don't have time. Well, let's do this. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians 2. Those are your options right there, believing ahead or whatever. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 1. Paul says this, "Now, brethren, concerning the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him," which is the rapture. Isn't that interesting? We just read in Matthew how the angels go and gather together to where we all go up to heaven. "Not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ has come." They were worried that the rapture had already happened. "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes away first." Now, we haven't talked about this, but during this time, this Great Tribulation, I think that many, many people will walk away from their faith. They're going to, I don't know, we understand why. A, they don't know it's coming because no churches are teaching it. But 2, they're going to be so confused when it's like, hey, you need to get this mark if you want to eat food. And hey, and no one's told them you can't do that. Do not get the mark, okay? You're on your own. But people don't know that. They're going to rationalize, get hungry, I'm going to be fine. And they don't realize they've just destroyed their eternal destiny. Jesus says in Matthew 24:9, "Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. You'll be hated by all nations because of me. And at that time, many will turn from their faith. Many will betray each other and hate each other." Jesus has just told us, and so did Paul in Thessalonians, that none of this is going to happen until this falling away comes to be. 2 Thessalonians says this, 2:3, "Let no one deceive you. That day will not come unless the falling away comes first. And the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition." Until the Antichrist comes on the scene, none of this is even happening. Verse 4, who opposes and exalts himself above all that's called God and that's worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. That's that whole abomination of desolation thing. Why is this important? Because we have to be prepared for this timeline. So what I want to do as we end today is I want to actually read together Matthew 24. These are the words of Jesus, and we're going to look at it from this timeline and see if what Jesus says is going to happen is going to happen. Matthew 24:3. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us when these things will be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age." And Jesus answered and said, "Take heed that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name and say, I'm the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are what? The beginning of sorrows, right there, the very first. Jesus just told us what was going on. The beginning of sorrows, we know it as the seals 1-4. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. You will be hated by nations by my name's sake. They will be offended. Even in this particular beginning of sorrows, there will be people that will be martyred for their faith at this particular time. It won't be like the Great Tribulation, but it's going to start getting bad. Then many will be offended. One will betray another and will hate one another. Many false prophets will rise and deceive many. Lawlessness will abound. The love of many will grow cold. Here's what Jesus says, but he who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as witnesses to the nations, and the end will come. We talked about this, that now with the internet available, how it is the gospel is being preached to all the nations. People will say, oh, all that's happening now. It is happening now, but like I said, none of this really begins until we get the Antichrist that comes on the scene. Verse 15, he says, then when you see the abomination of desolation, so we've already seen this, the beginning of sorrows. Jesus says, now there's the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet. And then we went through the whole thing. Let those who flee in Judea to the mountains, let him on the housetop. We'll go down. You see that. Pray that your flight might not be in the winter. Verse 21, for then there will be a great tribulation. There it is right there. Such as not been since the beginning of the world until now, nor shall ever be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. If anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or there, do not believe it. Because false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. This is what I keep saying. Someday you're going to turn on CNN. The Antichrist will be healing people, raising people from the dead, doing miraculous things, feeding 5,000 with a fish and a loaf. And people that are Christians that have no idea what's coming down the pike, they're going to just buy into it and walk away from Jesus. That's why this is the most important thing I think we've ever taught. Verse 25, see, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if you say, if they say to you, look, he's in the desert, do not go out. Look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. Because Jesus says, it's not going to be like that. When I come, this is how I'm coming. For as the lightning comes from east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation, Jesus says, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, powers of heavens will be shaken. And then what happens? The Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of trumpet and gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end to another. That, I don't know that we can get much clearer than that. I really don't. I don't know that we can take the words of Jesus and say, oh yeah, it's way back there. It's not. So we have to be prepared for that. So I know today, everything we went through in about 200 miles an hour, you're going to have a bunch of questions. So please write your questions down. Leave them on your table. Next week, Charles Cooper will be with us. We are literally flying him in from Florida. It is very expensive to bring him in. We're doing it. We're getting him a hotel because this is how important this is for me. So we've got to get this message out. We need your questions. We need him to be able to answer everything. He will be here for an hour to an hour and a half. As many questions as we have, I don't even care. And then we're heading him back to the airport. So it's going to be a fast and furious day for him. But I want us to have lots of questions. So please write your questions down. Come next week. And then after next week, we'll head right into Revelation. So Father, thank you for this timeline. I pray that as confused as we all probably are, that you will just make it simple. Make us see that the words that you told us, we have to take as the gospel truth. We cannot make something because we don't want to go through a bad time like the tribulation. God, help us to be Christians who are prepared and ready for what is going to happen. Whether it's our generation or our kids or our grandkids, God, we have got to prepare the church for this. I pray for that with everything in me. In Jesus' name, amen.